Quorum. We do.
Got them whipped into line.
Exactly. Good morning. Meeting will come to order. I've asked Rodney Davis to open us with a prayer. Rodney.
Thank you. Please bow our heads. Thank you, God, for allowing us to come together today during a tragic week. Let us all remember the victims in Las Vegas and of the disasters that we've seen our country face over just the last few weeks. Let us all come together today to govern, and let us all work together to continue to lead this great country, the United States of America. And may God continue to bless all of us and all of you. In His name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Meeting will come to order. I note a quorum is present and that each member has before them copies of the material on their agenda at their place today. H.R. 2936, the Resilient Forest Act of 2017, gives the Forest Service more authority and much-needed flexibility to improve and expedite forest management activities in federal forests. The past two fire seasons are among the most expensive on record, and this year appears to be no exception. Secretary of Ag Sonny Perdue recently announced that wildland fire suppression costs for this fiscal year may exceed $2 billion, making 2017 the most expensive year on record. This legislation is an important step in expediting forest management activities in the National Forest System to promote healthy, resilient forests and prevent catastrophic wildfires. I'm proud of the work we did on the 2014 Farm Bill to empower the Forest Service to work in a collaborative process with all stakeholders to be stewards of our nation's resources. However, that was only the first step. We're committed to further providing the Forest Service the tools it needs to carry out its mission. I'm proud of the bipartisan support this committee showed last Congress during our committee markup. H.R. 2521, the South Carolina Peanut Parity Act of 2017, adds South Carolina to the Virginia-Carolina peanut producing region for the purposes of appointments to the Peanut Standards Board. At the time of the establishment of the Peanut Standards Board, South Carolina was not a major peanut producing state. However, now they're the fourth largest and produce over 8% of U.S. grown peanuts. They deserve to have input in the establishment or alteration of peanut standards. H.R. 2921, the National Forest System Vegetation Management Pilot Program Act of 2017, authorizes the U.S. Forest Service to create a pilot program to assist in the management of our federal forests to reduce wildfire risks and associated costs. These management pilot projects are approved by the Forest Service, but will be conducted and paid for by the private sector. H.R. 2941, the Kisatchie National Forest Land Conveyance Act, I probably hurt somebody's feelings with that, introduced by our colleague, Mr. Abraham, authorizes USDA to sell specified federal land in Wynn Parish, Louisiana. The rural residential qualities of the land make it incompatible with national forest management, and this transfer will eliminate unnecessary administrative and boundary maintenance costs on the already strained Forest Service budget. Lastly, H.R. 3567 authorizes the transfer of the title of land owned by NRCS to Riverside, California, to the Riverside Corona Resources Conservation District. The Conservation District has invested $2.8 million into the facility with the hope of eventually acquiring the property and would like to invest in further improvements when the property title issue is resolved. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting these common sense pieces of legislation. I now turn to the ranking member, Mr. Peterson, for any comments that he has.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think the bills, with the exception of H.R. 2936, are non-controversial, but that bill, I am a co-sponsor of it. I think the bill addresses some of the concerns that I've previously expressed regarding regulations stemming from lawsuits. Environmental groups have adopted a sue and settle strategy that allows them to use the court system to twist laws against agriculture. And this, of course, leads to policy decisions being made by activists and bureaucrats rather than Congress. So H.R. 2936 would simplify forest management activities as a means to reduce some of this behavior. Some of my colleagues on this side of the aisle have concerns about several provisions as currently drafted. I think the bill was marked up in natural resources, and that's I think the issue is. But anyway, I'm not quite sure how the future of this bill and how it's going to proceed through the Senate. So we'll have to work on that. But I look forward to further discussions on some of these topics as we head into the Farm Bill discussions. And with that, I'm supportive of moving this process along, and I yield back.
All right, the bill H.R. 2936 is now before the committee for consideration. Without objection, a first reading of the bill is waived, and it will be open for amendment at any point. Mr. Costa, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the members of the committee. The measure that was just referred to, H.R. 2936, I think is a work in progress. I think it's long overdue that this committee attempt to try to address our issues on United States forest land management. As the chairman pointed out, the record amount of money that we've spent on putting fires out across the country is in part due because we have, in my opinion, not been doing a very good job in managing our forests. That's just the bottom line. And there are other complicating factors. We have a lot more people living in forest areas that didn't live there 20, 30 years ago. And in the last 2 years, those of us in the subcommittee have looked at our money that we've allocated for forest management budget purposes, and all of that's going to putting out fires. And we've had to augment it. So there's another bipartisan measure that Schrader and Simpson are carrying that I think need to be worked as a part of this effort. And there's a Senate companion measure. And ultimately, I hope this will lead in terms of legislation that will redirect the United States Forest Service into setting aside monies to really begin to actively managing our forests in this country. And in some instances, I think natural wildlife fires ought to be, money's used to put those ought to come from FEMA or some other source. It gets back to the money here in terms of what money we set aside for managing forests and what money we use for putting out fires. And that's where the problem lies, I think. And let me finally say that we've had this summer over 90 fires in western states. And just last month in my area, in the Yosemite area, we started off with 1 fire, and within 12 days we had 6 fires in a 30-mile radius. And the amount of resources it took to put out those 6 fires, were enormous. With CAL FIRE and the governor calling National Guard and the Secretary of Agriculture putting additional resources that were strained across the country. So clearly we know the challenge at hand, and I hope that working together in a bipartisan fashion, Mr. Chairman and the ranking member, we can address the changes that need to be done to do better than we have been doing, because clearly the status quo is not working.
All right, gentleman yields. Ms. Fudge, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as a ranking member of the Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry, I'm really disappointed that this did not come through regular order this Congress. This is a major problem, but this bill runs afoul of the National Environmental Policy Act, as well as the Endangered Species Act, which we know. I agree that we need to have this discussion, and we probably should have it now. We also have to address first the havoc that the spending on wildfires is having on the ability of the agency to do its job, because they are robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, already we know that we've spent $2.4 billion, where we only appropriated $1.7 billion. That money is coming from someplace. And so what they're doing is they're taking money from one account to put it in another. Now they're talking about transferring some $600 million from other programs that include everything from road maintenance and recreation to planning for timber harvest and completing the NEPA reviews. I mean, it's important, Mr. Chairman. And so we need to discuss something like this before we have a markup. I'm with Mr. Costa that it is the money. We don't have the resources now to do what we should do, so we need to at least make some decision about allocating more resources or saying to the agency, we don't expect you to do your job. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Agenda is back. Anyone else wish to be heard? Ms. Crawford, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of H.R. 2936, the Resilient Federal Forest Act of 2017, sponsored by my fellow Arkansan, Mr. Westerman. While in the 1st District we have been fortunate to not face these wildfires, our neighbors in Arkansas have. This bill seeks to return resilience to overgrown fire-prone forested lands by implementing proactive management standards intended to lessen the threat of wildfires. This is a common-sense bill that tackles the growing economic and environmental threats of catastrophic wildfire that have been seen in Arkansas and around the country. The Resilient Federal Forest Act addresses several issues associated with how the Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management handle the needs of our forests in the wake of wildfires. H.R. 2936 works to solve funding problems associated with fighting wildfires by allowing FEMA to transfer limited funds to the Forest Service or BLM once wildfire funding is exhausted. Considering the budget constraints we face in Congress, it's important to maximize existing funding sources. This act includes a provision that allows states to fund forest management activities on national forests through state-supported forest management funds. The bill works to prevent wildfires and help our forests and rangelands become resilient again by streamlining environmental assessments and utilizing existing tools found at the Forest Service and the BLM. Mr. Westerman's bill allows for wildfire-damaged trees to quickly be harvested to pay for reforestation activities and improve the health of our forests. This common-sense legislation updates the current Forest Service and BLM practices to better prevent forest fires and facilitate a fast recovery in the unfortunate event of a forest fire. As I close, I strongly urge the full committee to support Mr. Westerman's bill, H.R. 2936, the Resilient Federal Forest Act of 2017. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I would tell my colleagues that I got information yesterday that the President will be submitting a significant emergency spending request supplemental for this issue so that we won't be, in fact, robbing Peter to pay Paul. We'll have an opportunity to vote on this issue as part of a new appropriation. So with that, I recognize Mr. Thompson for an amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. I have an amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 2936.
Without objection, we consider the original text of the bill for purposes of amendment. Recognize Mr. Thompson for remarks.
Well, thank you, Chairman. My amendment in the nature of a substitute reflects the changes to the underlying bill that were accepted in the House Committee on Natural Resources markup during consideration of the Resilient Federal Forest Act of 2017. The Natural Resource Committee accepted 2 amendments by voice vote. One amendment offered by Mr. Soto sets standards for arbiters used for challenges against forest management activities. The second amendment was a clarification to an existing categorical exclusion for pests and disease. Additionally, the amendment includes 2 further changes to the underlying bill. The first change allows for more flexibility for the Forest Service to achieve expedited reforestation after a catastrophic event. The amendment also directs the Secretary to promote the research and development of innovative wood products. I urge the committee to adopt the amendment so that the committee may build upon the great work already begun by the Natural Resource Committee and more specifically on the successful management authorities that were provided by this committee to the Forest Service in the 2014 Farm Bill. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Any other members wish to be heard on the substitute? Anybody? All right, hearing none. Do other members have amendments they wish to offer? Mr. O'Halloran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first amendment makes a few changes to the NEPA and ESA provisions. It shrinks the size of the NEPA categorical exclusion in Section 111, shortens the list of activities eligible for categorical exclusions under Section 115, and lengthens the consultation time for Historic Preservation Act and Endangered Species Act. Mr. Chairman, I have some concerns with both this legislation and the process which it has come to be marked up in this committee. I would like to remind everyone that there is no subcommittee work done on this legislation. We have had no full committee hearings on this at all. This fire season has already become the most expensive fire season, and it isn't even over yet. Estimates for the cost are at least $2.4 billion. Much of this funding has come from other accounts within the Forest Service budget, limiting the ability of the agency to carry out essential functions, like reducing fire risk or performing the effective forest management. I know that there are experts, including the Secretary of Agriculture, who have publicly expressed concerns with making a successful fire funding fix dependent on policy riders that are both dangerous and could slow down a meaningful and effective fire funding fix that would enable us to meaningfully fund firefighting and other management components and programs in the Forest Service. As a sidelight, I've sat through 3 different fires over the last 10 years that I can watch from my front window. I co-chaired the Forest Health Oversight Committee in Arizona. I have 5 national forests in my district, and plus the Grand Canyon. And I have some concerns over the idea that we would have 10,000 acres of categorical exclusion in a process that is complicated for our watersheds, for the preservation of our lands that are critical to the watersheds of Arizona. And I think that there has to be a better way to do this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield.
Anyone else wish to be heard on the gentleman's amendment? Chair, okay, Mr. Thompson, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the gentleman from Arizona's concerns, but the fact is that this committee for several years has had hearings focusing on this issue, really reaching out to the professionals who in their heart have a passion and a desire to properly manage our national forests. I'm talking about the folks, the good people that work for the Forest Service, but they have been, largely without the tools to be able to get this job done. They were at the heart of what we passed in the last Farm Bill to provide those categorical exclusions. The bureaucracy that, and I agree, the bureaucracy that's there, and that's the problem, the bureaucracy that's there has been contaminating our watersheds when we cannot get ahead of the understory, and when we allow these catastrophic fires to burn through. It's just not what it does as changing those carbon sinks into carbon emitters. It's what it does to the soil, that nothing to retain those nutrients and solids that contaminate the watersheds. And that was one of the purposes of our national forest, really, when it was first founded, was to supply timber, but also it's the heart of most of the watersheds that we have in those parts of the country where we're fortunate to have those national forests. And so these are categorical exclusions that these are additional tools that the Forest Service needs in order to be able to do its job and to do its job effectively. I appreciate the concerns of the gentleman, but I just need to oppose this particular amendment. And I yield back.
You want me to go back? Anyone else wish to be heard? So I recognize myself for 5 minutes. I also strongly oppose the gentleman's amendment. It strikes the heart of our categorical process. It continues to lengthen the time, it continues to leave in place basically the existing management processes that we're trying to get to avoid these kind of catastrophic fires. And so the gentleman's amendment goes in the wrong direction, and I would strongly urge my fellow committee members to oppose that. And I yield back. Anyone else wish to be heard? All right, with that, put the amendment to, or the member, Mr. Halloran, to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Noes have it. Does anyone else have additional amendments? Mr. O'Halloran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My second amendment would add to the Resource Advisory Committee section. It would allow a RAC member to be an additional 4 years of service on the RAC for years where the RAC does not do $500,000 worth of projects or the RAC does not have a quorum. This is a simple way to keep our RACs functioning, especially across the West, by keeping membership full and projects moving forward. There's been a substantial concern within Arizona and some other areas that while we have to have a need for a quorum, and some of these committees are, by statute, are so large, and given the size of the areas that are represented, very difficult to bring the amount of members necessary together for a quorum and get the work done that's needed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the gentleman's amendment? Chair recognizing himself for 5 minutes. I'm opposed to the amendment. I'm not sure where the $500,000 comes from. Appears to be arbitrary. And I'm concerned that the gentleman's amendment would allow basic members to serve forever on our RAC advisory committees, and that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. So put that, I'll yield back. Anyone else wish to be heard? Seeing none, with that, the vote will occur on the amendment. All those in favor of Mr. Halloran's second amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not adopted. Any further amendments to the bill? Chair recognizes Mr. Peterson for an amendment, for the motion.
Mr. Chairman, let me find my sheet here. I move that the amendment of the nature of a substitute to H.R. 2936 be approved.
This is a debatable motion. Does anyone care to be recognized on the gentleman's motion? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment in the nature of substitute to H.R. 2936. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The opinion of the chair is the ayes have it. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. It's darn close. Glad I had my hearing aids on. If I hadn't had my hearing aids on, I wouldn't have made that. Mr. Peter, recognized for another motion.
Chairman, I move that the bill of H.R. 2936 as amended be reported favorably to the House with the recommendation that it do pass.
Thank you, gentlemen. The question is on the motion to favorably report H.R. 2936 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. All opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill as amended is ordered reported to the House, favorably to the House. Does any member give notice to file intent to file supplemental minority, additional dissenting views on H.R. 2936? If so, please have them submitted to the council's office, room 1407 by noon, October the 6th, 2017. My script is out of whack. It's now ask unanimous consent for the Subcommittee on General Farm Commodities and Risk Management to be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 2521. Without objection, so ordered. The bill H.R. 2521 is now before the committee for consideration. And without objection, a first reading of the bill will be waived and it will be open for amendment at any point. Does any member wish to have remarks on H.R. 2521? Seeing none, does any member have an amendment to the bill? Seeing none, the question is on. All right, Mr. Peterson, you have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill H.R. 2521 be reported favorably to the House with the recommendation that it do pass.
All right, that's a debatable motion. Does anyone wish to speak on the motion? Seeing none, the question is on the motion offered by the gentleman from Minnesota to favorably report H.R. 2521 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Being the chair, the nays have it, and the bill H.R. 2521. So the ayes have it, right?
You said nays.
Oh, say nays. Glad somebody's paying attention. Thank you. The ayes have it. The bill is H.R. 2521 is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. Any member wishing to file, intent to file supplemental, minority, or additional dissenting views to H.R. 2521 will need to have those submitted to the council's office, room 1407 by noon on October the 6th, 2017. I ask unanimous consent the Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 2921. Without objection, so ordered. The bill 2921 is now before the committee for consideration. Without objection, a first reading of the bill will be waived. It will be open for amendment at any point. Does any member wish to speak on 2921? Seeing none, does anybody have an amendment to 2921? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Mr. Peterson for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill 2921 be reported favorably to the House with the recommendation that it do pass.
It's a debatable motion. Does any member wish to be heard on the bill? Seeing none, the question is the question is on the favor. The question on the motion offered by the gentleman from Minnesota to favorably report H.R. 2921. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill H.R. 2921 is ordered to be favorably reported to the House. Any member wishing to file supplemental, minority, additional, dissenting views to H.R. 2921 will need to do so in the council's office, room 1407 by noon on October the 6th, 2017. I now ask unanimous consent that the Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 2941. Without objection, so ordered. The bill H.R. 2941 is now before the committee for consideration, and without objection, a first reading of the bill will be waived. It will be open for amendment at any point. Any member wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, does any member have an amendment to the bill? Seeing none, Chairman recognizes Mr. Peterson for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill, H.R. 2941, be reported favorably to the House with the recommendation that it do pass.
It's a debatable motion. Do anyone wish to be heard on the bill? Seeing none, the question is on the motion offered by the gentleman from Minnesota to favorably report H.R. 2941. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. Any member wishing to file supplemental, minority, additional dissenting views to H.R. 2941 will need to do so to have those submitted to the Council's office, room 1407, by noon on October 6, 2017. I now ask unanimous consent that the Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 3567. Without objection, so ordered. The bill, H.R. 3567, is now before the committee for consideration, and without objection, a first reading of the bill will be waived and it will be open for amendment at any point. Does any member wish to be heard on the bill? Seeing none, does any member wish to amend the bill? Seeing none, the gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Chairman, I move that the bill, H.R. 3567, be reported favorably to the House with the recommendation that it do pass.
That's a debatable motion. Any member wish to be heard on the amendment, or excuse me, on the motion? Seeing none, the question is on the motion offered by the gentleman from Minnesota to favorably report H.R. 3567. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. And the bill, as amended, the bill, H.R. 3567, is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. Any member wishing to file supplemental, minority, additional dissenting views, H.R. 3567, will need to have those submitted by October the 6th, 2017, to the Council's office, room 1407, by noon that date. Without objection, the usual instructions are given to staff that consist of making technical, clarifying, or conforming changes as are appropriate without changing the substance of the legislation. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.